he's also received the Grand Canyon Historical Society research grant to help him with all his work. Since 1973, he has run about 180 Grand Canyon river trips. He credits these river trips as an inspiration for his career and as a librarian, archivist, and a historian of the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. Please welcome Richard Quartaroli.
John Wesley Powell had a major impact on the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River, but this talk is more for fun. Of course, indigenous populations have been down through the most of the canyon for over centuries. A few resources he used for these campsites. Leslie Allen Buckethead Jones, pictured on the right, wearing the first known GoPro, did a scroll map and identified campsites. Doc Marston's manuscript was unpublished when he died in 1979, but it was published by Tom Martin and Hazel Clark in 2014. A lot of notes about mileages and campsites. Drifter Smith, boatman and historian, the first guides training seminar run by the Grand Canyon River Guides, 1989, did a presentation on Powell's itinerary, and it still remains unpublished. Great resource, though. The journalists from the trip that we're going to focus on, George Young Bradley, John Wesley Powell, and John Colton Sumner, particularly Bradley and Sumner, and the transcriptions from Michael Guglieri's first through Grand Canyon, the most accurate ones. What we're going to look for in the river journals, the rapids, whether they ran them, the numbers, portage, their line down past them. The side of the river, Sumner was the invariably, except for a couple of instances, did the side of the river for the campsite. Powell did sometimes, and when he did, he agreed with Sumner. Bradley never mentioned the side of the river. The mileages, Sumner and Bradley always did the mileages. Powell occasionally did. Sometimes they agreed pretty closely, either exact mileage or within a mile. Sometimes they were off by as much as 5 miles. The vegetation, a lot less than today because this was high spring runoffs scoured the shoreline vegetation. They mentioned willows and mesquite, which are particularly important. The geology, when the layers appear and disappear. The sandbars, of course, pre-Glen Canyon Dam, so we had huge sandbars down there and a lot of them. And the archaeology, occasional mention of the sites and the artifacts. What's not known is the flow of the river. This was before any gauges were on the Colorado River system. So Leslie Allen Jones mentioned 10,000 cubic feet per second, plus or minus. And Marston in his book just says very low stage of water. The first campsite really I'm calling mile 0 is at the mouth of the Paria River. Technically not in Grand Canyon geologically, and they're a little confused about where they were. They're mentioned in the Ute Trail, crossing the Fathers. These things were upstream in Glen Canyon. And however, Sumner kind of semi-correctly mentions the Paria River, camped on a sandbar on the north side. He's using north and south, even though geographically, up in Marble Canyon, it's west and east. Here we have a couple of pictures. Wheeler, on the Wheeler survey, Timothy O'Sullivan, 1873, showing the mouth of the Paria River where it was until mid-June of 1912, where it moves downstream almost a mile. So when they're talking about the Paria River, they're camped further above where the mouth is today. The first camp in Grand Canyon, down below Soap Creek on the right. Today's camp is above the rapid, but they had lined and portage down past the rapid, so camped down below. And the second trip in 1872, they camped above, but Brown Stanton expedition in 1889 camped down below where Powell did in '69. And it was just below there where Frank Brown drowned the next day. This is a particularly interesting one to me. It's number 2 camp, August 6th and 7th. They spent 2 days there. Powell and his brother Walter hiked up to the rim to observe an eclipse, but they were unsuccessful because of the cloudy nature of the monsoon season. But what's important here is some of the geology where they're talking about rock is so much broken and limestone just in sight. And Powell mentions about the many projecting points, Sumner says on a sandbar. And you see in the bottom figure, you'll see the arrows pointing to some of those broken rock and projecting points. The red wall limestone appears just downstream from here. The top picture is of the camp looking out towards the river. Another one that's fairly well known, agreed upon, is above Tiger Wash Camp in a limestone cave. The mileage works out pretty well. We talk about a cave of the earth, camp in a cave, and under a marble cliff. This is another interesting one. They first see Mesquite, Powell mentions that. It's about mile 39 above the Red Wall, or the Marble Canyon Dam site. And the mileage takes it down to about across from the Anasazi footbridge in my estimation. Little Colorado River, 3 nights there. They're attempting some observations against some clouds, foiled that. They know that at this point they're directly due east of where they want to end the trip at the Colville or near the mouth of the Virgin River. They're talking about under the shelving edge of a cliff on the south side of the Chiquito. And Sumner is a little more descriptive. He says, camped under a ledge of rocks 100 yards below Flax River and a quarter of a mile from the Colorado. This kind of places them in the area of Ben Beamer's cabin, which was an improved or reconstructed Anasazi site or ancestral Puebloans. So they were along the ledges up the Little Colorado River a bit. Sumner's estimate is a quarter of a mile. Head of Hance Rapid. This, by the description, coming to a long rapid, and the Granite coming up nearby. The upper Granite Gorge starts just downstream from Hance. Sumner, however, says they camped on the right. Bradley, of course, doesn't mention the side, and Powell doesn't say either, which is problematic. There's a scout on the right where people pull in. You can also scout on the left from the main camp. You'd think it might be kind of obvious that if they looked across the river, they'd see a better spot, but who knows whether it's right or left. Another interesting one, in the middle of Grapevine Rapid, they line and portage down partway through Hance Rapid, then they run the lower part, they run Sockdolliger, then they get to Grapevine and they decide it's unrunnable, so they're portaging and lining down the right side of Grapevine, and they get camp there and then finish the portage in the morning. Here's a picture from the Stanton trip in 1890 where they also camped and repaired one of the boats. And Powell's trip in 1872 also camped there. I have no idea, but I don't imagine that people ever camped there after that. You see the rocky shoreline, and I mean, these aren't even round boulders to sleep on, so pretty sketchy. This Silver Creek, what's called Bright Angel Creek, and they spent 2 nights there repairing boats, making new oars from the driftwood they had found, and they lost their leavening agent there, their baking soda. So from there on, they were reduced to hardtack. They didn't even have biscuits. Talk about camping under a weeping willow, so Gooding's willow. Talk about the the Moki ruins, and the sandbar on the right. They only run 10 miles the next day. They're starting into continuing the Granite Gorge below Phantom Ranch, below Bright Angel, and they camp probably at the top of Hermit Rapid. They've portaged 2 rapids. People suppose it's Horn Creek and Granite. They're in the, continue on, they come up to, they most likely lined Crystal Rapid. At that time, it wasn't the big drop that it became in December 1966. Somewhere in that rocky shoreline on the right, perhaps as far down as Tuna Creek. Here they are in the middle of a stretch of rapids called the Gems or the Jewels, perhaps around Ruby, 105 Mile on the left. There are a couple of campsites in there that are used, and they're usually on the right side. So it's a couple of little sand spits in today's shoreline. So it's a guess as to which one they might have pulled into. Bass Camp, down around mile 109. It's obvious. It's I suggested upstream, and thanks to Helen Fairley about the location of ancestral Pueblo dwellings. It's pretty much agreed on after I was convinced that it was Bass Camp, River Right. This is another interesting one. I think their estimate of mileages at 20, 21, and 22 are over by maybe as many as 4 or 5 miles. Puts them in the Conquistador Isle or below. Conquistador Isle, the upper 2/3 is sandstone ledges, Tepete sandstone ledges, not indicated by Sumner's description there of on a sandbar among a few willows. Below the lower end of Conquistador Isle does have some of that, and then there are campsites, Forster and fossil locations. They portage a heavy rapid and then get to the top of another one and decide to camp. Probably the Bedrock Rapid, and then the next one where they camped above was Dubendorf. So at the head of Dubendorf, at Galloway Canyon. They pass a couple of creeks, Tepete's Creek and Deer Creek, and they talk about Deer Creek Falls. 100-foot estimation of Powell's, but a 200-foot of Sumner's. Mileage works out till they, in the description of a rapid that they camp at the head of is above Kanab Creek on the left. This one's very problematic for me. I've never identified anything that resembles what Bradley describes as camping above a rapid in a singular recess or alcove in the rock about 100 feet long and 50 feet wide, forming a fine shelter. Powell says camp under rock. And Sumner says south left side in a lime cave. I'm still looking for that one, so any experienced river runners out there can help me out. I'd appreciate it. They run lava falls, and they talk about all descriptions about the lava flows in that area in the western Grand Canyon. Sumner's this estimate of the fall in lava is within 2 feet. He was the first one to describe that. He says 15 feet and 40 yards, and it's USGS has measured it as 13 feet. They camp down below. The mileage puts them in the area of 190 to 200 miles. It's Sumner's description is a little vague. There's some missing words in his journal, and he talks about camped out of sight, adhering of, was at the supposed to be the river, or where, what are the missing words? First time in 10 weeks. This is a little spot at 190 Mile on the right. A little ledge there. It's real quiet. It does have a rapid down around the bend. How do you get out of sight and hearing of the river and not spend a lot of energy to get there? This, with Wayne Raney, the geology discussion, would they have bothered climbing up to this point when they could have found somewhere else? They're below Diamond Creek. By estimated miles, they don't notice Diamond Creek. If they had, and they had known the longitude from Ives' expedition, they would have been able to tell how far west they were and how much further they would have had to go on. They didn't, nobody talked about Diamond Creek. They did mention about seeing some Indian gardens and stealing some squash, that they finally had a tasty dinner after months of half rations. Definitely at separation. The main canyon comes in from the right. On a debris fan, there would be a campable area there, but they camped on the left side in a gulch, which is completely overgrown now. I don't know anybody who's gone over to the left side or explored in that area. In the morning, after scouting and evaluating the rapid from the left side, they cross over to the right side. 3 men, the Howland brothers and William Dunn, hike out the canyon, and the men line down partway down the rapid and then run the rest of it. Lower end, about in the mile 250, 255 range for a camp on the left. This is all affected by Lake Mead now, so as far as IDing a campsite in these areas is not really conducive. Below the Grand Wash Cliffs, somewhere in the 290s, perhaps down around Sandy Point or South Cove. And then August 30th, they're at the mouth of the Virgin River at mile 323. Powell and his brother Walter end their trip there. The other 4 men continued downstream. So, in conclusion, the figures on the dates on the left in red are the ones that are that they did layovers in, spend more than one night. The third column is Sumner, where he's identified the side of the river. To the left of that is Bradley with his mileages, and then you have Les Jones, Doc Marston, Drifter Smith, and myself. The highlighted in the red of the last 3 of us are ones that we have known agreements. But the important thing is down at the bottom where it says Bradley, he is overestimated at 20 miles, or about 6%. And Sumner is overestimated about 32 miles, or about 10%. And these are under grueling conditions. They're in a rush to get through the canyon because of the damage to their boats, loss of oars, but particularly their food. They're doing a lot of strenuous work on less than normal rations. The real conclusion here is for river runners who want to know where Powell camped, and if they, in current days, if they have camped at any of those spots, or if they could camp at them. So we have the Lee's Ferry area, which is restricted. If you're a commercial crew, you can stay on your boats. There's a private camp just below the ramp. The one at Soap Creek below the rapid, you could pull in there with a motor rig. You could line your boat down to that spot, or you could pull in up above and walk down and camp below. 22 Mile, the Eclipse Camp, is definite and possible. Above Tiger Wash, Limestone Cave is a current camp. The Mesquite Camp, across from Anasazi Bridge, you could camp there. But that one's not known. The Little Colorado's off limits. Hance, left or right. Mid-Grapevine, you're not going to try. The Boat Beach at Roy's off limits. Head of Hermit, yes. Tuna Creek, Ruby, possible. Bass Camp, yes. Galloway, yes. The Forest of Fossils, a guess. Above Kanab, yes. The rest are, if you can find it, go for it. Thank you.